Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. To what extent can leaders go to remain in power? Short answer, any. Case in point, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, he's been in power for almost 2 decades now. His grip on power is slipping. His ambitions only rising. He dreams of leading a new Ottoman empire. He wants to lead the Muslim world. He wants to raise Kashmir at international platforms to win an audience and hopefully some support. But none of these antics are helping. Turkey has been grey-listed for financing terrorism. Its economy is in a bad shape. The president is mired in corruption scandals. The opposition has joined hands. So what does President Erdogan do? Declare a war on the West. It's a tried and tested method. Every time there's a challenge at home, open a new war front outside. It works. This time, the president wants to expel 10 Western ambassadors. It's quite dramatic and self-defeating, we say, and it's already bleeding the economy further. On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss how this could be the beginning of the end of President Erdogan. Also on the show, Turkey's friend Pakistan surrenders to banned Islamist group Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, or the TLP. Their parliament, the Pakistani parliament, will now debate if the French ambassador should be expelled from the country. In the Sudan, the military has detained the Prime Minister and other top leaders of the government. We bring you the very latest on what's being called a coup in Khartoum. Is Israel set to attack Iran's nuclear program? Reports say that a $1.5 billion budget has been set aside for an operation like this. And there is such a thing, apparently, as a broken heart syndrome. We'll bring you the findings of a new study. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
A terror attack took place in Jammu and Kashmir during the Indian Home Minister Amit Shah's visit to the Union territory. Terrorists hurled a grenade at a police station which landed outside the compound. No injury or loss of life reported. Israel's land authority has published tenders for about 1,300 new settlement homes in the occupied territory. The new settlement homes are to be built in 7 settlements, in addition to the 2,000 settlement units announced last August. The US envoy for North Korea urged Pyongyang on Sunday to engage in talks to denuclearize. Special Representative Sung Kim called Pyongyang's recent ballistic missile test concerning and counterproductive against lasting peace in the Korean peninsula. Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba's founder Jack Ma delivered blunt criticism of the country's financial system last October. Since then, the company has lost $344 billion in market capital as a result of a series of steps taken by the Chinese government as a part of its crackdown following the speech. The Bangladesh Naval Chief Admiral M. Shaheen Iqbal called on the Indian Chief of Army Staff General M.M. Naravane and exchanged views on strengthening bilateral defense cooperation. Admiral M. Shaheen Iqbal is on a 6-day visit to India. Colombia's most wanted drug lord, Dairo Antonio Usuga, also known as Otoniel, is to be extradited to the United States after being caught over the weekend in the rural area of Antioquia province. Over 500 special forces and 22 helicopters were involved in the operation. Kenya's iconic Masai Mara is in danger due to climate change. Experts say low migration of wildebeest due to reduced rainfall in the National Reserve is putting the entire food chain at risk. Thousands of people have been evacuated as heavy rains triggered floods in Vietnam. Mudslides have been reported in some areas. People have been advised to move to higher grounds as rains are expected to continue in the coming few days. Star all-rounder Ben Stokes has been added to England's Ashes squad for the Australia tour later this year. Stokes had taken an indefinite break from cricket to focus on his mental health, while also recovering from a second operation on a broken finger. He will now fly out to Australia on the 4th of November, along with England's test specialists. LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers have earned their first win of the new NBA season with a narrow 121-118 point win over the Memphis Grizzlies. After 2 straight defeats, the Lakers rode on new recruit Carmelo Anthony's 28-point performance at the Staples Center. The 37-year-old also moved to 9th place in the NBA's all-time scoring list.
Tonight we'll talk Turkey. Show you what Turkey's leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan is up to. He was attending a rally on Sunday, was about to cut a ribbon, when a man began screaming for help. It was quite dramatic. This man's house had apparently been burned down. There was no one to help him, so he made a desperate appeal to the president at this rally. What did Erdogan do? You'll have to see it to believe it.
Hazır mıyız?
Well, it takes a special skill to be so disconnected. He completely ignored the pleas of this man. That's President Erdogan for you. For the Americans, he's a headache. For the Europeans, he's a bully. But for his own people, Erdogan is a self-centered hypocrite, they say. One who is driving his country to ruin. Turkey faces many troubles today. Inflation is at a record high. 1.5 million people have been pushed towards poverty, and now the country has the label of a terror financing hub. Last week, Turkey was grey-listed by the Financial Action Task Force of the FATF, grey-listed for financing terrorism. That puts Turkey in the same bracket as Pakistan. We were the first to tell you about this. Over the weekend, Erdogan responded to this humiliation by pressing the self-destruct button. The Turkish president now wants to evict the ambassadors of 10 countries. Erdogan is picking a fight with the West, a fight that he's bound to lose, or a Turkey shoot as they call it. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you how the Erdogan presidency is imploding. First, let's tell you what happened on Saturday. President Erdogan summoned his foreign minister. He ordered 10 ambassadors to be declared persona non grata, meaning these diplomats are undesirable in Turkey and they must leave. Which ambassadors are these? Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Finland, New Zealand and the United States. Basically the West. These countries are key trading partners of Turkey, by the way. There are 7 NATO allies on this list and 4 G7 countries. It's a powerful bloc, and Erdogan has decided to pick a fight with them. He made the announcement in a rather dramatic fashion at a rally.
Burada kalkıp da
You cannot dare to come to the Turkish Foreign Ministry and give orders here. I gave the necessary order to a foreign minister and said what must be done. These 10 ambassadors must be declared persona non grata at once. You will sort it out immediately.
ne yapması gerektiğini söyledim.
It isn't clear if the Turkish president will follow through on this threat. He has made the announcement, but the eviction orders have not been delivered to the diplomats yet. So what made Erdogan do this? What was the trigger? Osman Kavala. Who's that? A 65-year-old businessman who was jailed 4 years ago. Kavala has been accused of trying to overthrow President Erdogan. And these 10 ambassadors had called for his release. The demand did not go down well with the president, so he ordered them out. But this decision has already boomeranged for Erdogan. The idea of a breakup with the West is not sitting well with foreign investors. Turkey's currency, the lira, tumbled to a record low. The Turkish people will now get less than 10 liras for a dollar. The currency has lost more than 20% of its value since January. Just like the lira, Erdogan's own popularity is also sliding. Look at the latest opinion polls. Turkish citizens were asked a very simple question. If elections were to be held today, would Erdogan win? Close to 50% said he won't. There are more people who want the president to lose. They want him out. You can blame this discontent mostly on the worsening economy, but that's not the only thing that is ruining Erdogan's political fortunes. The president also finds himself caught in a corruption scandal. This is about the Turkish Youth Foundation. It is linked to the younger son of the president. His name is Bilal Erdogan. Recently, a former employee of the foundation blew the whistle on this organization. Apparently, the Turkish Youth Foundation was allocated more than 1,000 government-owned buildings. What for? They were turned into dormitories for the members of Erdogan's party. Reports say this foundation serves as a front to install party loyalists in the Turkish bureaucracy. Hundreds of members were given jobs or considered for jobs at state institutions. This includes jobs in the Turkish military, the judiciary, and the police. The opposition smells blood in the water. They're coming together to take down Erdogan. A broad opposition alliance is being shaped now in Turkey. As many as 6 parties have already joined hands. More could follow. This would have been unthinkable in 2016 when Turkey had witnessed an attempted coup. Erdogan did not just survive it, he weaponized it. He used the coup to strengthen his grip on power. 5 years ago, he took control of institutions, he purged the opposition, put tens of thousands of people in jail, he dismantled the Turkish democracy. Now, a slew of setbacks have exposed the decay in his political empire. President Erdogan is playing the nationalism card by attacking the West. Unfortunately for him, Turkey's voters can now see through the charade, and rising prices are punching holes in his rhetoric. Question: who is a bigger threat? A radical leader or a leader who is a puppet in the hands of radicals? You saw what's happening in Turkey. Let's now turn to Pakistan. Prime Minister Imran Khan has sold his country to radicals. A lot happened over the last 3 days. Lahore was turned into a war zone. 350 people were released from jail. And soon, Pakistan's parliament will be forced to debate expelling the French ambassador. Things like these only happen in Pakistan. It's a peculiar and borderline absurd story. So allow me to give you a brief background first, just so that you understand the situation better. Do you remember these images? These are pictures from 2020. Pakistan's radicals protesting against French President Emmanuel Macron. Why? Because France had published caricatures of the Prophet. So extremists in Pakistan cried blasphemy, they flashed swords, burnt effigies of President Macron and demanded that Pakistan cut all ties with France, expel the French ambassador and stop trade with France. Leading these protests was a man named Saad Hussain Rizvi. Who is he? Rizvi is the head of a banned radical Islamist party. It's called Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, TLP. This man's job is to incite people, get them to create chaos. In October 2020, Rizvi threatened the Imran Khan government. He gave the country's prime minister a deadline. More like, expel the French ambassador by April 2021 or face severe protests. That was the message. Now, how do civilized countries deal with radical elements like Rizvi? By cracking down on them with a steel rod. But Pakistan is different. Imran Khan bowed down to these demands. He agreed to think about the expulsion of the ambassador. In the meantime, Rizvi was put behind bars, just to maintain law and order. So that's where he is, behind bars. Now, it's been over 6 months. Rizvi's followers are restless. Their leader is in jail. The French ambassador is still very much in Pakistan. And Imran Khan has once again not delivered on his promises. So Saad Rizvi's followers decided to protest once again. They took to the streets last week, hijacked several cities, including Islamabad, Rawalpindi and Lahore. These protesters clashed with the police. At least 10 people died in Lahore over the weekend. 3 of them were policemen. Reports say at least 700 people were injured. The protesters also announced a long march to Islamabad. Over 8,000 TLP supporters began walking, driving, hitchhiking towards the capital city. What for? To create pressure on the government. How do civilized countries deal with those who indulge in violence? By cracking down on them. But Pakistan, again, is different. It sent its Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid to negotiate with the radical Islamists. So he went to negotiate, but he came out after agreeing to most of their demands. Reports say charges against Saad Rizvi are now being dropped. TLP workers are being released from jail. And all of this is happening at warp speed. 350 workers of the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan have already been released. What's more, the Imran Khan government is also considering removing the ban on TLP. Here's what else Imran Khan's government has agreed to. Discussing the expulsion of the French ambassador, Pakistan's parliament will soon be debating the future of the ambassador, whether he will remain in the country or not. Have you heard anything like this before? Which country considers expelling a foreign ambassador because a banned outfit is protesting against him? Ambassadors are expelled, yes, but because of a conflict or war. There is no conflict between Pakistan and France, but there is a conflict in the power structure in Pakistan. Imran Khan seems to have sold the country's governance to radicals. Violent protesters have become policymakers in Pakistan. They're deciding whom to release from jail, which country to sever ties with. Parties like the TLP live for such power, thrive in such power. They like to arm twist. I don't know how many of you remember this, but the TLP had once even forced Pakistan into lockdown. And this was long before the Wuhan virus arrived. This was in 2017. The TLP locked a highway near Islamabad. They protested in Faizabad for 3 weeks. Today they have all gathered at Murid Ke near Lahore. They say they won't leave till their leader Saad Rizvi addresses them. You see, every country has some bad actors, every country has radicals, but countries around the world know how to deal with them. Civilized countries know how to deal with those who create violence and terror at home. Imran Khan tends to succumb to them, appease them, and sell his country to radicals. We hope the US administration is watching this. They say history is the best teacher. Well, only if you're willing to learn. If you are dead set on ignoring the past, you walk into the same trap again and again, and that's exactly what America is doing in Pakistan. According to media reports, the US government is negotiating a strategic agreement with Pakistan. What is this deal about? Using Pakistani airspace. If this deal is signed, America can use the Pakistani airspace for operations in Afghanistan to launch airstrikes, to send spy drones, basically to carry on their so-called anti-terror operations. What's in it for Pakistan? Well, we can think of three things. Number one, a reset in diplomatic ties. Joe Biden is reassessing his relations with Pakistan. Remember, he still hasn't spoken to Imran Khan. 10 months, no phone call. With this deal, that may change, and Islamabad is really hoping to get back in the good books of the Americans. Number two, maybe some help on the home front. Pakistan's own Islamists are on the march, as you just saw. The government could use America's help in the conflict ahead. Maybe weapons, maybe funds, more likely both. And number three, an attempt to draw the US away from India. This is what Pakistan wants. But will Joe Biden agree to these terms? He hasn't yet. The negotiations are still happening. Officially, Pakistan's foreign ministry has denied these US media reports. Here's what they said, and I have a quote here. No such understanding is in place. Pakistan and the US have long-standing cooperation on regional security and counter-terrorism, and the two sides remain engaged in regular consultations. This is what the foreign ministry of Pakistan is saying. It's like a deja vu. America once again trusting Pakistan, once again recruiting them in the war on terror. We thought Washington had learnt its lessons, but clearly they haven't. They walked into the same trap in the year 2001, and 20 years later they're doing the very same thing again. Pakistan is not interested in fighting terrorism. They see the Taliban as a geopolitical tool. They still harbor Al-Qaeda terrorists, the same Al-Qaeda that orchestrated the 9/11 attacks. So why is America hell-bent on partnering with Pakistan? Because they're desperate. The US does not have a staging ground near Afghanistan, no airbase, no field office, nowhere to run intelligence operations from. The nearest US base is in West Asia, in Qatar and the UAE. So right now, American drones are flying more than 1,800 kilometers. They fly around Iran, into the Pakistani airspace and cross over to Afghanistan. It's a long and turbulent flight, literally and otherwise. You see, this current setup is temporary. American planes can use Pakistani airspace, but Islamabad can pull the plug any time. They can effectively block America's access to Afghanistan. Hence Joe Biden's desperation. With a formal agreement in place, the US will have guaranteed access. Biden's other option is Central Asia. He could try and secure a military base in Uzbekistan or Tajikistan. He wouldn't need Pakistan then. But there's a Vladimir Putin-sized problem there. Central Asia is Russia's backyard, and President Putin will not be thrilled about American bases there. So that's almost a non-starter. Which leaves Biden with Pakistan. America needs strong intelligence in Afghanistan, strong and reliable intelligence. Or else we could be looking at wayward drone strikes, like the one we saw in August. The Pentagon thought they had hit a suicide bomber in Kabul. In reality, they had killed an aid worker and his family. That's the cost of bad intel. And Pakistan knows it. They know that America is running out of options. They know how desperate Joe Biden is, and they're cashing in. But the question is, what is America losing in this deal? We'll have to wait for the specifics, but the overall optics are definitely not good. Earlier this month, American diplomat Wendy Sherman visited Islamabad. She said that the visit was for a very specific and narrow purpose. She said the United States was not interested in a broad relationship. Less than 20 days later, we get this news. It tells you a lot about America's resolve. This deal may not get through. It still may get derailed. There could be a last-minute cancellation. But the fact that America is even considering this option tells us one thing. 20 years of war, 2,000 plus deaths, and billions of dollars spent, but America still hasn't learned the most important lesson, that you cannot trust Pakistan. For the moment, we'll shift our attention to another country that's battling dictators, the Sudan. The military decided to overthrow the civilian leadership in the country today. Take a look at what happened. That was Khartoum earlier today. Protests have now broken out across the country. What are these people protesting? They're pushing back against the military's power grab, what looks like a coup. The Sudanese military tried it last month too. They failed then. The country has been on the edge ever since. The military, militia leaders and warlords, they've all been calling for the restoration of the military rule. The civilian leadership tried to push back. Today, their mission suffered a serious blow. Top leaders are in detention, including the Prime Minister. Global condemnation has been pouring in. The United Nations, the United States, the European Union, the African Union, the Arab League, they've all expressed concern. But will mere statements be enough to pull the Sudan out of this crisis? Our next report tells you about the situation on the ground.
Khartoum is burning again. When the people of the Sudan heard about a coup, they took to the streets. They burned tires to block roads. But they couldn't stop the generals from taking control.
A government that consists of independent national caliber will lead the country until the elections with a fair representation of all the people of the Sudan.
The drama began early Monday morning. The military reached the doorstep of Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. He refused to back the coup. So the military put him under house arrest at an unknown location. The Prime Minister's office attempted a pushback. They released a statement calling on the people to protest. But the military prevailed. The political leadership has been arrested, civilian rule has been dissolved, and a state of emergency has been declared.
We reject the statement of General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan entirely. We want a civilian government and the dissolution of military council. We will not negotiate with the army anymore. Our people are perseverant and patient, and they persist that the government must return to the civilian rule.
The statement of General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is weak and doesn't mean anything for the Sudanese people, whether it was announced by Burhan or anyone else. The Sudanese people have specified their position concerning our military rule.
This tension has been brewing for 2 years. The military and civilian leadership have been at odds. It began when longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir was overthrown in 2019. He was a dictator who ruled the country for 30 years. The military removed al-Bashir, but refused to hand over power to the people. When public pressure intensified, a transitional government was set up. It had members of both the civilian and military leadership. They were supposed to remain in charge until 2023, but with this coup, the military seems to have broken that arrangement.
There are demonstrations going on in the capital of Sudan, in Khartoum. People are demanding for a return to that arrangement where there was a coalition government, and therefore this implementation of the agreement should go ahead. The worry also is that the various armed groups are likely to resume fighting unless some order is really brought, a solution is found to handle this situation.
The people of the Sudan are split. Backers of a civilian rule and supporters of the military have held their own protest rallies in the last month. They are likely to come face to face again, as the Sudan's fragile democracy faces another test. Bureau Report, World is One.
China is cracking down on Islamic identity once again. It's removing Arab-style features from mosques, remodeling them to appear more Chinese. This campaign of sinicization is playing out in Xining, alternatively known as Xining. It's the capital of Gangli province in western China and home of the Hui Muslims. They comprise at least 16% of Xining's population. Who are these people? The Hui Muslims are among the 55 ethnic groups recognized by China. They form the biggest Muslim population in the country. At 10.5 million strong, they're also China's third largest ethnic group. Interestingly, members of this community are not persecuted the way Uyghur Muslims are in Xinjiang. Why is that? Because these people have made their version of Islam compatible with Chinese concepts and practices, portrayed it as inherently Chinese and not a foreign influence. So they speak Chinese, Mandarin, they try to look Chinese, they even act Chinese. But Beijing keeps pushing for more. It wants to eliminate whatever remains of their Islamic identity. Bizarrely, this intolerance even extends to Islamic architecture. On your screen are images of the Dongguan Mosque. It's a 700-year-old mosque, the largest in the city of Xining. It's famous for its green and white dome, accompanied by 2 tall minarets. Both these features have now disappeared. Look at these images now. The dome is gone, the minarets are nowhere to be found. This 14th century mosque has undergone complete renovation. It now resembles a Communist Party office. Throughout this year, China revamped the mosque, forcefully demolished the dome, tore the minarets down, all in the name of integration and national unity. The Hui Muslims have no choice but to agree, it seems. Any form of protest will mean imprisonment or a term at one of those re-education camps that China runs. So they stay silent as Chinese authorities run over their mosques. Look at this image now. This is the Nangguan Mosque in the same city. This one too has been remodeled. Its domes, minarets and Arabic calligraphy replaced by Chinese text and architecture. Something similar happened to the Jiaman Mosque in the city of Kira. It was once a prominent center of prayer for Muslims. It's now hidden behind high walls of Communist Party propaganda with no indication that it was ever a religious site. Then we have the Weizhou Grand Mosque in Ningxia, completely sinicized. Its domes, minarets, they've all been replaced with tile pagodas. Islamic calligraphy has been replaced with Chinese sayings. It's incredible how much China wants to control the lives of its Muslims. It no longer cares if they're dissidents or not. If they believe in separatism or not, it doesn't matter. Beijing doesn't see any difference. It wants the Chinese identity to prevail over every community, every culture, every ethnicity and religion. Which brings us to Xinjiang, the biggest victim of this sinicization campaign. The most militarized region in the country. The pandemic provided China an opportunity to further strengthen its control over this province. Today it has been cut off from the rest of the world. No one knows what's happening in Xinjiang and how much worse the genocide has become. So on Thursday, a group of 43 United Nations member nations issued a statement calling upon China to allow, quote-unquote, immediate, meaningful and unfettered access to Xinjiang. They asked Beijing to let independent observers visit the place, including the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. The statement was signed by the likes of the UK, US, France and Germany. But the name that stands out among the list of signatories is Turkey, a country which deports Uyghur refugees to China in exchange for economic aid. Its hypocrisy is striking. But it's not enough to pressurize China. Beijing has not budged 1 inch. For the nth time, it has denied allegations of human rights abuses, saying the politicization of the issue by Western nations has made any future visit to Xinjiang impossible to happen.
The US and a few other countries are desperately trying to cover up their own terrible human rights record, but the world sees it clearly. What I should point out again is that this visit should be a friendly one, should not be a so-called investigation with presumed guilt. That's not acceptable to China. Actually, at this moment, Bannon, the barriers are not on the Chinese side. It's the politicized practice. It's the preset conditions of a number of Western countries which have made this visit not impossible to happen.
For years, Chinese Muslims have been suffering. For years, the world has tried to help them. And for years, China has curtailed all such efforts. So perhaps it's time for world bodies to do away with statements of condemnation. Instead, they should now outline possible paths to hold China accountable. Let's turn to West Asia now. Two old foes talking about war, Israel and Iran. It all started with a report last week. Israel is apparently setting aside funds for attacking Iran. How much money are we talking about? Around $1.5 billion. Israel plans to spend this money, $1.5 billion, on new weapons, modern jets, intelligence-gathering drones and other artillery. The rumor is they also want a very specific American weapon. The GBU-72 Advanced 5K penetrator. It's also called the bunker buster. This weapon could be used to penetrate Iran's nuclear sites. Israel wants to buy it from the US. Will Joe Biden sell? The US has sold smaller bunker busters to Israel in the past. Plus, there is bipartisan support for arming Israel. The next question is, will Israel attack? How serious are they about starting a war? According to some reports, the Israeli Air Force is already training pilots. Their pilots are running simulations, basically reenacting how they would hit Iranian targets. Is there any scope left for diplomacy? Well, there always is, but the window is closing fast. Officials say the Iran nuclear deal is on the verge of collapse. Neither America nor Iran is taking a step back. Joe Biden is sticking to his original demand, rejoin the deal and we will lift sanctions. Iran wants the very opposite, lift the sanctions and we will save the deal. To make matters worse, the new regime in Iran is second-guessing the deal. Their worry is this: It's a lot of haggling, a lot of diplomacy. Is it worth the effort? Their hardline vote bank would love a more stern approach to the West. And that's where we stand, a perfect stalemate. Except in this case, Iran is not interested in the status quo. If the talks collapse, Tehran will continue nuclear enrichment, and if that happens, Israel will take the military approach. Foreign Minister Yair Lapid says, striking Iran is not just their right, it's their responsibility.
If a terror regime is going to acquire a nuclear weapon, we must act. We must make clear that the civilized world won't allow it. If the Iranians don't believe the world is serious about stopping them, they'll race to the bomb. Israel reserves the right to act at any given moment in any way. That is not only our right, it is also our responsibility.
You can guess how Iran responded to that. Here's what their top security officials said. Instead of allocating $1.5 billion budget for atrocities against Iran, the Zionist regime, that is Israel, should focus on providing tens of thousands of billion dollars funding to repair the damage that is going to be caused by Iran's shocking response. Strong words there. Both countries are threatening war. They're talking about devastating consequences. The nuclear weapons are the big issue here, but it's not the only one. Iran is one of the biggest advocates for a Palestinian state. For decades, the issue has fueled the Arab-Israel rivalry. Some Arab states have buried the hatchet. They have dehyphenated Israel and Palestine with the Abraham Accords. Iran's supreme leader had some tough words for those Arab states. He compared the Abraham Accords to sins that had to be corrected.
Some governments have unfortunately made errors, have made big errors, and have sinned in normalizing their relations with the usurping and oppressive Zionist regime. It's an act against Islamic unity. They must return from this path and make up for this big mistake.
Iran will debate the nuclear deal, it will debate sanctions, but it will not debate Palestine, which is why Israel's latest moves are likely to enrage them further. Around 3,000 new settlements have been approved in the West Bank. This land was captured by Israel in the 1967 war, but Palestinians claim it as part of their future state. Almost 460,000 settlers live in the West Bank. More could follow under the new Israeli government. So many differences, so many threats and war cries. But will Israel actually strike Iranian nukes? Well, they have done it before. There have been cyber strikes, power outages, mysterious fires, all sorts of accidents at Iranian nuclear sites. Tehran has always blamed Israel for these mishaps. If Israel and Iran do come to blows, it would be a failure on two counts. One, the obvious destruction and loss of life, and two, a massive failure for diplomacy. Joe Biden firmly believed that he could save the nuclear deal with Iran, but 10 months into his presidency, Iran and Israel are threatening war. And for the first time in 2 decades, a member of Japan's imperial family is getting married. The royal wedding is just hours away, but the excitement is all but absent. No crowds are gathering to wish the couple well. Instead, public opinion is largely hostile. Why is that? Because the wedding is being seen as a union of unequals. A princess is marrying a commoner. A lawyer raised by a single mother who unfortunately happens to be embroiled in a financial scandal. The princess is being slammed for her choice. Her fiancé is being hounded for his mother's decisions. What does the frenzy tell us about the Japanese society? Here's a report.
He is an aspiring lawyer. She is a real-life princess. He is the son of a single parent. She is the niece of an emperor. Their union had all the makings of a modern-day royal fairy tale, only that it wasn't. Ever since Japan's Princess Mako announced her engagement to Kai Kamuro, their love affair has been mired in scandal, public disapproval, and tabloid frenzy. The simple reason is that Kai Kamuro is what the Japanese call a commoner, and Princess Mako belongs to a family that is considered divine. Naturally, the union has been deemed as unworthy, ill-suited for the status of the world's longest-running dynasty. This debate has played out in Japan for 4 years, right from May 2017, when it was first announced. This is when the princess got engaged to Kai Komuro, her classmate at the International Christian University in Tokyo. She was drawn to his seriousness, while he admired her confidence.
Mr. Komuro gives me warm support. I was first attracted to his smile like the sun, but as I grew to know him, I became fond of his personality, very generous and sincere, while working hard for his objectives with strong will.
At one night I saw a beautiful moon in the sky and I promptly called her. Since then I call her every time I see the moon. The princess stays with me quietly like the moon. I am attracted to her affectionate personality while she also has strong will.
The couple had planned to get married in 2018, but the wedding kept getting postponed. The imperial household maintains it was due to a lack of preparation. But royal observers suspect it was because of Kai Komuro's background. The 30-year-old comes from a family of modest means. He lost his father and grandparents at a young age, so he was raised by a single mother, which is often looked down upon in Japanese society. Single mothers in Japan are stereotyped as incapable of raising good children. This misogyny was further enhanced by a financial scandal. In February 2018, Japanese tabloids reported that Komuro's mother owned 4 million yen or $36,000 to her former fiancé, who had helped fund her son's education. Within weeks, the royal family announced they had put the wedding on hold. The princess gave a remorseful statement saying they had rushed into things too quickly. Ever since then, the Japanese press has hounded the princess and her fiancé, scrutinizing every little detail about their lives, even the way they carried themselves last month. A Japanese TV crew spotted Kai on the streets of New York with a new hairstyle. Photos of his slick ponytail flooded the internet. They also set tabloid magazines ablaze with criticism. They questioned whether such a hairstyle was befitting of an imperial spouse. For Princess Mako, this relentless attention has taken its toll. Announcing the wedding date, the imperial household has revealed that the princess has been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, primarily because of the slander against her and her future husband. As a result, the wedding is going to be a private affair. There will be lots of paperwork, but little festivity. The princess will then give up her royal title, leave the imperial palace in Tokyo, and start a new life as a commoner in New York. Will that end tabloid obsession with her life and decisions? Ask another couple that left royalty behind but couldn't shake off the paparazzi. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
A royal romance is not something that most of us can relate to, but a heartbreak, that's something we've all felt, I dare say. It's that pain from the sudden end of a relationship, that hurt that you feel when you lose a loved one. It leaves you feeling like an emotional wreck. Suddenly, your life seems to be falling apart. Authors and poets have written all about this feeling at great length. Movies have tried to capture it. In Bollywood and Hindi soaps, a heartbreak often leads to a heart attack. The moment of the news of a death, the moment the news of a death is delivered, or the father or the mother is unable to bear the pain and suffers a stroke, or when the hero decides to break up, the heroine collapses, these scenes get more laughter than tears. They're mocked for their theatrics, brushed aside as unnecessary drama. Well, it turns out a broken heart is not an exaggerated feeling after all. It is real, legit heart condition. It's called the broken heart syndrome. It is characterized by shortness of breath and chest pain. A broken heart can be triggered by a breakup, a divorce, or the loss of a loved one, even a scary medical diagnosis. What's more, Bollywood for a change was right. Heartbreaks can mirror a heart attack. You feel a similar chest pain, you have trouble breathing, you may even faint. But unlike a heart attack, a breakup does not leave you with blocked arteries or permanent heart damage, at least most don't. The Cleveland Clinic says 2% of suspected heart attack cases, also have broken hearts. The figure, experts say, is an underestimation. The Cleveland Clinic says about 1% of people with broken hearts have died, meaning a heartbreak can lead to death. A breakup can lead to death. People can die from the pain of losing a loved one. It happens in real, not just in books and movies. A study recently concluded that women aged 50 to 74 are more likely to suffer from heartbreaks. This compared to younger women and men of all ages. So we decided to find out why. It's not like 60-year-old women are dating more than teenagers, or 70-year-olds are getting ghosted or blocked on WhatsApp more than people in their 20s. So why are they vulnerable, so vulnerable to heartbreaks? Well, here's what we found. When seen medically, a heartbreak is a bout of sudden physical or emotional stress. And this stress goes on to affect your heart's normal rhythm, even the pattern of your heartbeats. Your heart then temporarily enlarges. There is a temporary heart muscle failure. The result is this: you start feeling a chest pain, and this can happen within minutes or up to hours of a stressful event. This is the numbing pain we often refer to as the pain of a heartbreak. This medical pain, when added to the mental pain, can seem blinding, difficult to cope with. What makes older women more vulnerable is not toxic dating, but a chemical called estrogen. It is supposed to protect a woman's heart from hormones released during stressful events. But as women age, the level of estrogen in the body declines. So even a not-so-stressful event can trigger a heartbreak. The death of an acquaintance, for instance, can feel like the death of a near and dear one. A divorce in a family can feel like your own divorce. The study published in the Journal of American Heart Association found that 88% of heartbreak patients were women. Most of them were 50 or older. Cases of heartbreak increased 10% for women in the age bracket of 50 to 74. So this is the science behind the pain of a heartbreak. And if you're wondering why I'm telling you all of this, it's because the next time you feel that your heart is broken, you can take care of yourself. You can take the time out to heal. Do whatever makes you feel better. Heal your broken heart with a tub of ice cream if that works, or a movie marathon, or go to a doctor if required. Experts say yoga or journaling also helps. Moral of the story: there is such a thing called a broken heart, and the feeling/condition is as real as it can get. On that note, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
Time for